Welcome back, Rabbi Dr. Eliezer Brot. What a pleasure to meet with you and speak with you again. We're after Pesach, and as promised, we're going to continue discussing the Seforim, the legacy, specifically of the Seforim of Reb Chaim Kanievsky. And we've gotten tremendous feedback, both personally and in writing. You know, when someone writes the following, the Shurim of Chaim Kanievsky's Seforim are wonderful. I must admit that the topic didn't interest me at first, but after listening for a few minutes, you truly brought out some insightful nakudis, which I wholeheartedly agree. Someone else wrote, I've just finished part 3 and thoroughly enjoyed it. Keep up with all the digressions. They help to give a wider and richer view of Reb Chaim. I'm hoping that there will be many more in the series. And this is the most interesting. People feel this way. It is no question that you have found the greatest way to be maspid and give tribute to Reb Chaim. So, Reb Eliezer, you're doing something unique and different. How are you today?
Baruch Hashem.
Okay, so it's nice to have you back. I know you're a man of not many words. So, also, we try to cram everything into a few minutes. People don't like it. But let's spend some time together. We've spoken up until now about Reb Chaim's sefer on the Rambam, about the Maharsha, the Orchos Chaim Laharash. Let's transition now to some of Reb Chaim's Seforim on halacha. And today specifically, we want to talk about 2 interesting Seforim, one on tattoos and one on the grasshoppers. Everybody has heard about the story with the grasshopper. Maybe there's something else you can bring to the table, something different. Maybe a good place to start. Did Reb Chaim have any Mesorah or a Shita or a Mahalach and how to learn halacha and about learning halacha? That might be a good place if you have anything to speak on that topic.
So the answer to that question, which is a great way to introduce the next few Seforim that we'll discuss, which will hopefully be the more halachic Seforim of Reb Chaim, is like this. Already in the first one of these presentations, I mentioned that the way I see it, Reb Chaim Kanievsky had a tremendous influence. He was influenced by 4 different people. He was been by many people, and he became his own person. But he was influenced by different things he took from these Gedolim. One was the Vilna Gaon, another was the Chazon Ish, another was his father, and the fourth was the Mishnah Berurah. Now, when you many of his Seforim that he wrote, we know he wrote many different Seforim, but they were halachic. They were Seforim on halacha. Famous is the sefer Derech Emunah, 4 or 5 volumes that are on Hilchos Ram Be'iyun, a Mishnah Berurah like sefer, and he wrote other halachic works that some are less known, some are more known for different reasons.
You mentioned Derech Emunah. It's worth pointing out we're about to embark on Mishnah Yomi Masechta Shvius. We're actually learning Seder Zraim now, Mishnah Yomi. Derech Emunah is a classic. If anyone is using the Art Scroll Mishnayos or any Pirush, Derech Emunah is mentioned all the time. So hopefully we'll get to that.
Right. But that we're not going to deal with today because the Derech Emunah is such a unique work; it needs its own thing. But to lead up to it, to discuss the lesser known works in halacha of Reb Chaim Kanievsky, to get to the more famous ones along the way, the Shaina Halachas and the Derech Emunah. Now, but in general, we see that Reb Chaim was very into this of learning halachadik, as I'll call it. Now, even though he's very into learning halachadik, he spells out all over the place, it's halachadik, but not halacha l'maisa. You say, don't rely on. I'm learning this topic, and he'll say, it's a bevat l'mashal. In the first sefer, which we'll discuss today, it says bevadai ein l'smay chalzeh. Or in his Derech Emunah, he constantly says it on the cover page in the introduction, the end of the introduction. But bottom line is that he was very involved with learning halacha. So the question is, where did this come from? So the answer is, I believe, is that, as I mentioned, these different people that had a tremendous influence on him, we find by them this important aspect of learning Torah with a focus of learning Aliba de Hilchasa. To start with, like this, Reb Chaim Volozhiner, the famous greatest Talmud of the Vilna Gaon, wrote numerous hagdamas to the various works of the Vilna Gaon that was published. He wrote different introductions to the work. And in each one of his introductions, he talks about his Rebbe, and each one is fascinating and very kedai to go through, and you can learn a lot about the Vilna Gaon by reading through these introductions. Recently, a few weeks ago, the a volume was collected all these introductions, not only of Reb Chaim, of the children of the Gra, and other such materials, and put into a volume called Hadaras Eliyahu, and it's available through Mesorah of Cook. Now, in one of the introductions, the introduction to Beer Halacha, which is printed in one of the first works of the Vilna Gaon printed, Reb Chaim says that one of the main nekudas of the Vilna Gaon was limud hashas lahaitzim mimenu halacha lemaisa. And for what? Almanas lasois ulekayim. And that's how you be mekayim the ur. Basically, learning it's not just to learn Torah, which is beyond important, especially in the Vilna Gaon mashal, but it's also to learn to know what to do. And this is Reb Chaim Volozhin is saying that this is what the Vilna Gaon. The Chayei Adam, who not the scope of this presentation, but was extremely mushbad and was involved with the Beis Medrash of the Gra and a Dayan in Vilna at the time, and was close with the Gra. Also, in both of his introductions that he wrote on the Chayei Adam, emphasizes that one of the reasons why he was writing this work is that halacha l'maisa fell by the wayside, and it needs to be. Even if one learns Gemara the whole day, but if you don't learn halacha l'maisa, you're not being makayim certain aspects of Torah. And so in the introduction of his first introduction, which is it's not printed in all the editions of Chayei Adam, and in the second introduction called Akdama Achroina, which both introductions are bechlal very kedai to go through, he emphasizes this nakuda of learning halacha l'maisa. Let me just see if there's a quote here. Hold on. Ikar alimun halacha is psukais. And then that's in one of the introductions. And then in the other introduction, he says, Sheyi halimun amanas lasois. Now, it was so important, so fundamental. The Chayei Adam on the Sharblat of the first edition, where he talks about different aspects of a sefer, also emphasizes this same point. He says, let me see if I can find the lashon here. He said this shar is not found in many of the later editions. He says, "Kitzrichen dafka lilmoid halachos psukos," and therefore you'll be able to be mekayim, so to speak, with his sefer. Okay, now moving further along, a fascinating sefer called Menucha Kedusha, which is possibly a Talmud Reb Chaim Volozhin, but definitely also influenced from the Vilna Gaon camp, which is a sefer a lot about Mahalach HaLimud. It was written. He was writing this for how to learn with Bar Mitzvah Bachrim for his own child and others. He was a Malamed, and this sefer he also talks about the great importance of learning halacha, and specifically he starts emphasizing learning, even if let's say you're a balabas, focusing more on l'chol hapachos, starting with Archaim. But why? Because it's so important to know. It comes up daily. Okay. Moving further along, obviously, the Mishnah Berurah, which I also said was a tremendous impact on Reb Chaim Kanievsky, which we'll get to, Amir Tzashem. But he, in his famous Hagdama to the Mishnah Berurah, also emphasizes this nakuda, that it's not only about learning, it's also ikar limud adam tzarich liyos belimud hamevi lidei maisa. And then he says how Archaim was neglected and etc. Yudvarim Yaduim, and it's a very kedai to learn the introduction. The Chazon Ish, who, and now sorry, before I get to Chazon Ish, the Mishnah Berurah's Hagdama, the Reb Chaim Kanievsky brings it by Arichos when he talks about his Shain Halachas, which is a work specifically on the Mishnah Berurah. Anyway, the Chazon Ish, who his uncle, his Rebbe, also had tremendous impact on him. In the Chazon Ish Emunah B'Tachin, he has different pieces by Arichos about the Chashivas. The most important area of Torah is halacha, and one has to learn halacha l'maisa. He has very interesting lines that are, the question always is who he's referring to, but you could see that he's very upset that the people were learning and they're being mechadish chedushim ein bem mimasha nemer l'moishe misinai af shehein sichoy shel yer shamayim v'tikkun amidos achikar chitzaini ba'alacha aval einem aspikas as tachas hamavukash me'adam, that you have to learn Yediyas HaTorah Hadinim, and he has this barichos in pages and a few different pieces where the Chazon Ish was very concerned. And Kiyadua, the Chazon Ish's sefer is a sefer with the halacha l'maisa learning shmaitz aliba the hilchos. Now, well, one thing with the Chazon Ish is that he doesn't spell that out, but that's the gang of the theme throughout the sefer halacha l'maisa. When this stopped in yeshiva exactly, and that the yeshiva world more learning focused on lumdus and whatever, this is beyond the scope of our session today. Mordechai Breuer's book on the yeshivas talks about it, but Adkan, the introduction of to understand where Chaim Kanievsky is coming from, when he also, many of his works are focused on halacha l'maisa, even though he says it's not l'maisa.
Okay, very interesting introduction. So, the two Seforim we mentioned at the outset you want to speak about today is about tattoos and about grasshoppers. So let's start with the sefer on tattoos. What's it called? How big is the sefer? What does it say inside the sefer? I'm sure you have some interesting anecdotes to add about how the sefer came about.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, the sefer is approximately it's approximately 110 pages. It's called Kuntris Pashegen Aksav, and he writes in the beginning, Yavar Kol Hilchos Ksevis Kaka. He has a date when it was completed, which is in Yud Ches Kislev Tafshin Lamavav, 1976. Okay. Now, as I've mentioned already in the past, Reb Chaim Kanievsky is very makpid. I think he was makpid. He writes why he wrote the different seforim that he did. So here, in the beginning of this sefer, he emphasizes that one has to know Kol Torah Kula, and all of Torah relates with each other. And he says that it's halacha l'maisa even for today. And in Yeridea, Simon Kuf Pei, there's not a lot of material about it, and there's a lot to add and a lot to collect. So basically, he decided to go ahead and to collect all the material and put it out as a sefer. Now, he broke it down into 21 simanim. It's in the form of at this. It seems that in the Derech Emunah, when he was working on Zram, so he formed what's famous. It's a very similar look of like the Mishnah Berurah. At this point, he did not do that. I don't know why, what was behind it, but this is simply a siman. He'll talk about a topic, and then at the end of each siman, he has a conclusion. What comes out from this siman, and he sums it up in a few lines, in very orderly manner. Now, of course, he goes through everything, bakol, as they say, on the topic, starting from the psukim, moving on to Rashi, all the Rishonim on the psukim somehow get in here, Midrashim, Yerushalmis, Bavlis, and everything, literally everything comes in here, and he breaks it down very, very mesudar, what it is, if it's biyad, bekli, what type of tzviyah doing. He has a chapter, Chayv Dafka, if you have to write letters, all different things about this topic. And as I said, it's broken down into 21 sections. So you'll say, okay, so Reb Chaim Kanievsky found the topic, and as I mentioned already in some of the other seforim, he was looking for this concept of meis mitzvah, neglected areas, and he doesn't throw that in for this particular sefer. You'll say, okay, but what does that have to do with anything? Okay, Baruch Hashem, we have people in the world of Kiruv, they are asked these questions about tattoos a lot, but even if you're not in the world of Kiruv, is the areas of tattoos nageh. So interestingly enough, for such a type of question, we consult the great Rabbi J. David Bleich in one of his maybe it's even his latest volume, Contemporary Halachic Problems. So he has an article that originally appeared as an article in the journal Tradition, and it's called Medical and Cosmetic Tattooing. So first, interestingly enough, he has a quote from a non-Jewish source in 1953 describing that in 1953 it seemed to be unheard of, unusual to have tattoos. But seems it changed, as anyone walking around on the streets all over, say in Eretz Yisrael, say in America, you could see this often. There's a famous thing about tattoos, and this I do not know I did not look into the earliest sources of it. But if someone has a tattoo, he might not be able to be buried in a Beis HaKvaris. Okay, could be not. I don't know. Interestingly enough, and this Rabbi Bleich brings down already right away in the beginning of this piece, that the Minchas Chinuch, who talks about tattoos, he says he never saw a person with tattoos. But obviously today it's very common. Now, what's Rabbi Bleich? Why does Rabbi Bleich have a piece about it? And this many rabbanim that are involved in the medical field know this is in the medical field, this is very negeh. What's a negeh for? For example, in radiation oncology, they do some type of form of for targeting, as Rabbi Bleich writes, targeting localization to assure beam alignment. So you have to make sure it's exact. So they use tattooing, and now, so you'll say, okay, great. So Rabbi Bleich has throughout this, he has in his Kedarka B'Kodesh, an amazing chapter with incredible research, and throughout this chapter, who's quoted very often, Reb Chaim Kanievsky's sefer. This is the Aleph Beis in the Sugya, very, very thorough, Kedarka B'Kodesh. As I said, he breaks it down super organized, and he has all the materials about it. And Reb Chaim Kanievsky concludes. So what I'm bringing out from Rabbi Bleich is it's a halacha l'maisa dika Sugya today. I don't think Reb Chaim Kanievsky, from what I went through, he ever mentions this thing. I don't know if he knew. If it could in 1976, I don't know if they had it so much, more related. But at the end of the sefer, he even has a kitzer dinim ha'olim mikuntra zeh, as Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Okay, now as I said, he breaks it down to all different fields. So I just want to focus on one, just to mention one thing about this that he breaks it down into. He talks about, there's a question, he talks about Lamashal, as I said in one of the previous presentations, I believe he had some influence from the Minchas Chinuch, and here he also quotes the Minchas Chinuch a lot. And one of the things I mentioned already earlier is that the Minchas Chinuch is famous for he created what's called a new mishpacha, the Chatzi Eved, Chatzi Ben Chayrin, and he broke down all different areas, what's the story with an androgynous and this halacha and tumtumus and blah, blah, and etc. Now, so here too, Reb Chaim Kanievsky has a question, a chapter devoted to writing tattoos on a basar of a cheresh, shaita, katan, eved, a guy, a behema. Now, so Adkan, very interesting. Now, for eved, he talks about a few times. A lot of people are very well aware. With Haman and Mordechai, was his eved, and there was a star written on him. And Reb Chaim Kanievsky a few times in the sefer Bechlal somehow gets back to talking about those midrashim about it, Kedarka B'Kodesh, throwing in the middle of nowhere this aspect. But he then has in the Simon he talks about, and what about writing a tattoo on Adnei Hasudeh Sarini Hames? So obviously this gets one's attention. Okay, so and Reb Chaim Kanievsky here, so after talking about this list, he says Adnei Hasudeh v'Sarini. What's Adnei Hasudeh? That's I'm about to explain, and what's a Sarini? So it seems that just like I said that the Minchas Chinuch was fascinated with the androgynous, the tumtumus, and bringing it in, Reb Chaim Kanievsky had this fascination with Adnei Hasudeh, and he so much so that he wanted to even it's brought down a few different places. He was even going to write a sefer about Adnei Hasudeh. He talks about it in a few different Seforim of his, and obviously the question is, what in the world is Adnei Hasudeh? Now, he never ended up writing the sefer about Adnei Hasudeh, but two people already did, heavily based on Reb Chaim Kanievsky, particularly this simon that I'm about to discuss. And as Mishnah Yomi is learning Klayim, Perek Ches Mishnah Hey talks about these Adnei Hasudeh. Now, one more second. Reb Chaim Kanievsky gave haskama to one of the contrasim, and he said, he says it's a beautiful thing, and then he says Reb Chaim Kanievsky writes in a letter to this author who doesn't write his name what it is, but when I was young, I also wanted to write a sefer on Adnei Hasudeh, and even had a name for Kvikar Ladin. Okay, now, so this sefer also talks about the Sarini. Now, what's the Adnei Hasudeh and what's the Sarini? That's what you're asking. So the answer is very simple. Actually, it's not. Okay, so when we learn, as Mishnah Yomi, all daf has we have to throw it out there. It's not only that it's for daf Yomi, it has, for the Mishnah Yomi project, is all Mishnah, an incredible resource. And Klayim, these Mishnayos are being, it could be, I forgot to check if it was just learned. I just learned it, mamish right now. If you learn Klayim, Paraches, Mishnah Hey, it talks about Adnei Hasudeh. What is it? It's a chaya. Says Rabbi Yosi, Metamas Boil Ka'adam. What is the Adnei Hasudeh? So right away, obviously, you look at the Bar Tanura. And he says, Chaya Hagdila Besades, Ukumin Chevel Gadol Yoitzim in Haaretz. a string comes out from the earth and it's a chaya. V'shma yadu yudaini akasa b'tayra u'mechuber with a rope. Then he looks like tzuris adam bepartzuf yadayim v'raglayim, and he says no one can get near it. It kills if you get close to it, and it will trap you. It's very dangerous. But the way you look at this Bartanura, it sounds like he's something he knew about. Now, looking at Art Scroll in English, it says as follows: a certain creature that has human-like characteristics. It notes in the notes that they add, it's an unusual animal unknown to us today, whose face, hands, and legs resemble those of a human. It's attached to the ground by a cord from its navel, and it draws its sustenance from the ground through the cord. If the cord is cut, it dies. So it seems to be some type of plant that's alive, looks like a person. It's not a person, but according to the Bartanura, it was very dangerous, and it could even catch people and kill them, even according to the Bartanura. Sounds very, very, very interesting. Now, so Reb Chaim Kanievsky, he has a question. If you write a tattoo on such a creature, and that's how he gets to the tattoos. Now it's clear, you could see already this thing that Reb Chaim Kanievsky was interested in it, because in Eglah Ruf I think he mentions it, and in Al-Tari mentions it. As I said, he was interested. He was interested in this thing. Chazal Shemuna B'Tachin also throws in these Adnei Hasudeh as these unique creatures, and Reb Gedalia Nadal in his sefer also throws in about it. It seems they were interested in this type of thing. Now, I'm not going to go barichos into what is this Adnei Hasudeh. Just will suffice to say that all the questions that this sefer deals with is just amazing, about eating them on Shabbos. What's a bracha if one sees them? This is a question of if you can make a Mashana Habrias. Why were they even created? And through this sefer that I have, he has letters and correspondence with Reb Chaim Kanievsky. So here, Reb Chaim Kanievsky, back to the tattoos, he talks about writing a tattoo on it, and of course, Reb Chaim Kanievsky throws in some other materials about it. He brings down that where's an interesting early source about it in an early Medrash Tanchuma printed by Buber, and he brings down the whole piece, and he has some other sources, a Kehelis Rabbah about it. And there's a Rash in Chaim about it. Chaim Kanievsky also brings that down. And anyway, so that's one aspect. Now, what's the Sarini? The Sarini is now just one thing, just as they like just to make it a drop interesting. What's this Adnei Hasudeh according to some sources? So it's been very much spoken about on the internet numerous times around Parshas Vayechi. Binyamin being a werewolf, and where it comes from, and is this Rabbeinu Ephraim, and who is this Rabbeinu Ephraim, and if you don't believe in it, what type of person are you? Are you a good Jew or are you a bad Jew? And Rabbeinu Ephraim says it not once, he says it twice, he says it 3 times, that Binyamin was a werewolf, and is werewolves real, and are you good, you're bad, because you don't believe in werewolves. There's so much discussion about this on the internet. I'm not going to discuss that. Maybe for all Parsha, which also exists, we have to throw that out there. For Parshas Vayechi, someone should speak about it, but some Makayers say that the Adnei Hasudeh Taka is this werewolf somehow. Okay, I just had to throw that out there. And Rabbeinu Ephraim, Chaim Kanievsky was involved with Rabbeinu Ephraim, so that's a way to throw in why we could talk about it now. Anyway, what's the Sarini? Again, another creature. It seems, according to the descriptions, it's found in the Taras Kehanim, but it seems to possibly be a mermaid. Again, a topic discussed on the internet. We're not going to get involved with it right now, but Akopanim. So Reb Chaim Kanievsky in the sefer, as I said, with the tattoos, he shows the same thing that we were exposed to from his unbelievable knowledge, from what became famous of his chayvus, of his yeda and kol tarakula. He plugs that in to here to go even ad halacha l'maisa, and it's beyond incredible. It's kedai to learn. It's almost all his other seforim. It's available on Hebrew books. It's interesting, even if you don't learn the whole thing. Some simanim. It's fascinating, and it'll be a great schus for his neshama, probably, if you do. And he'd be very happy. Okay, Adkan, this first sefer of Reb Chaim.
Okay, wow, a lot of fascinating material. When you say on the internet it's been discussed, you mean it's internet-level material, or there's scholarly works and real discussions about it?
There's everything. Oh, one second. But you're right. But I should say is that according to the Tiferes Yisrael, more important, because it's more negay. Because the way ArtScroll makes it sound like it doesn't exist, but ArtScroll is well aware that Tiferes Yisrael and others say it's the form of a chimpanzee, which is more negay. So obviously, this also gets into different other discussions, but we spoke enough already. Side topic and a side topic and a side topic. So you can already move on already.
And you just mentioned quickly Reb Chaim Rabbeinu Ephraim. You want to give one sentence on that? You said Reb Chaim is involved in Rabbeinu Ephraim.
It seems that Reb Chaim Kanievsky, the story actually was written up in the Mishpacha right afterwards in the Mishpacha magazine, which I already asked Mechila that I said publicly that I read it. So in at least 2 issues, there's discussion about it. The Klugman family sponsored Rabbeinu the Rekeach, and also Rabbeinu Ephraim. The Rekeach, Reb Chaim Kanievsky, I think he did all the work, or at least did the Marmakaimis. In the Rabbeinu Ephraim, he was also involved. I'm not sure which one, how much of the, it could be the Rabbeinu Ephraim he did. He also did it. From the introduction, it sounds like he also assisted by the Rekeach. Maybe he did more of the work. But anyway, he was involved to explain to find different sources, Kedarka with his incredible yeda for different materials relating to this Rabbeinu Ephraim. But
Okay, so that is about tattoos and Paschegen Haksav. Karnei Chagovim, grasshoppers. So everybody knows about Reb Chaim when he was learning about the sugya of grasshoppers. The grasshoppers came to him, and there's a video that came a second time, and there's a lot of, as you say, on the internet about Reb Chaim and the grasshoppers. So what could you say? What could you tell us about Reb Chaim and his grasshopper sefer?
Okay, so like this. So first, like this, Reb Chaim Kanievsky wrote a kuntris in the same year that he put out Paschegen Haksav. He put out the Karnei Chagavim, and at the end of the Karnei Chagavim, which is only 30 pages, he says that he finished it in Elul Tafshin Lamevav, 1976. Okay, this is interesting because there's a famous thing that Chaim Kanievsky used to print a sefer. When did he write his Seforim? In years that were leap years, because he had an extra month, not to worry about his chayvis. But here we see him printing 2 Seforim back to back in the same year. It could be Tafshin Lamevav was a leap year, but 2 Seforim in the year doesn't fit with the story. Whatever. Okay. Anyway, here too again he has Agdama. Why he's writing the sefer? So he writes. The reason is the Rambam says that there's a mitzvah to know the simonim, to be able to be mavdil between the behemoths and the chagavim that's mutter to eat and what's not mutter to eat. Even if you don't plan on eating it, it's still a mitzvah, says Reb Chaim, and he is mechiach in the first seminar of sefer, to learn the sugya, to know the dinim of the chagavim. Because many people will say, I'm not interested in eating grasshoppers, they're disgusting. So why should I learn this simon? Says Reb Chaim, no, based on the Rambam, it's a mitzvah miyuchedes to learn this thing. Besides the general mitzvah of Talmud Torah, there's a mitzvah miyuchedes for this. Because in the Torah, in order to in Parsha Shmini, we have the psukim where they talk all about the different minim that are out there, and all of a sudden we learn this pasuk. It says over here, which ones could you eat? Then it says So it sounds like, when I was young, learning this psukim, was in 7th grade. So I was right away. The Rebbe was like, he was listing right away. He was listing off all the animals and all the birds and everything. I'm like, how does he know this? Like, it's very hard. The answer is that he had this. It's called the Living Torah from Rabbi Kaplan. Amazing sefer, amazing job, done in a very short amount of time. Actually, the Mishpacha had a very nice write-up about Rabbi Kaplan this year, and
we must say that I think NCSY was involved in reprinting. Could be that's what the article is about. I know Rabbi Shefkin was involved in reprinting a lot of his books.
Yes, correct. So basically, right away it talks about. He says you can eat the members of the red locust family, the yellow locust, the spotted gray locust family, and the white locust family. And he has pictures that you can see, and he has his aris with a crazy bekias about the grasshoppers. Okay. Now, like everything else, so it's a pasuk. does not. So what more could there be about grasshoppers? So Baruch Hashem, we live in a time that there's already a few svarim written about grasshoppers. First, we have Reb Chaim Kanievsky's kuntras called Karnei Chagovim. That's about eating grasshoppers. We have a different sefer called Ha'arba b'Mesorah from Professor Zohar Mar, a frum expert in all different aspects of realia, animals, shrutz. He's written every year. He puts out at least another sefer, all different types of topics. He has a sefer on the Shemaina Sharatzim and a big sefer on the locusts. It's how long is the sefer? It's almost 200 pages. And Rabbi Yael Schwartz is also prolific and has written many svarim. He has a sefer on grasshoppers. Interestingly, I don't know why, but Rabbi Yael Schwartz, I was not able to find him mentioning Reb Chaim Kanievsky's sefer, even though it was written much after. Okay, now, so the point is, Reb Chaim Kanievsky sat down and he held it's very important, as he's saying, why that you have to learn this sugya besides the regular din of Talmud Torah. You should learn the sugya. There's a and based on the Rambam's and a fascinating chapter, Siman Aleph of the Sefer, and he has basically 13 simanim about the sugya with the various halacha. Kedarka b'kodesh with his bekiyas of incredible bekiyas, and then he ends off with Yeridei Siman Pei Ches. I think it's Siman Pei Ches or Pei Hey. I'm not sure. And he has 2 pages where he has the mechaber, and then he has a beer and a sharet tzir. So here you can already see the evolvement. I mentioned that in by Hilchas tattoos he doesn't have the Mishnah Berurah type format, at least for the end part he does, whereas there the liquid is not like that. Okay, so much so his great Bakiyas I found amusing is that in one siman he talks about Gemara and Chulin, and somehow he gets to talking about a Rabbi Shaya pick in the Mishnayos talks about why people don't bring it, why people don't bring a certain brisa, why Rishonim don't, why Rishonim don't bring a specific brisa in Teres Kohanim. So Chaim Kanievsky shows that they really do, and he also shows about a Matasyo Strashon. I found also two tremendous gedolim known for their crazy bekiyas. So Chaim Kanievsky Kalachayad, I think he does find the makar for them. Okay. Anyway, so now, fine. So we said that there's psukim, there's svarim. So is a negeya halacha l'maisa today? Yes. One could even find. I was just Chalamoid. So I was in the Biblical Museum of Natural History, the Museum Hatevi Atanachi of Rabbi Slifkin. It's in Beit Shemesh. And so there he has a display about, let's say, grasshoppers. He has a whole write-up about grasshoppers, and one could buy grasshoppers to eat. If you hold, it says if you go with the shita that it's mutter to eat, you can even buy grasshoppers. Now, do people eat it? Do from Jews eat it? Yes. As Zohar Amar talks about in the Sefer Barichos, Teimani Jews eat it, and other people also eat it. Now, when one learns the Sefer of Chaim Kanievsky, he talks about what about if I don't want to eat it, but what about if I do want to eat it? He has a chapter about it, and his conclusion, halacha l'maisa, is that one cannot eat it. The Mesorah was lost. Now, there's a famous Orach Chaim HaKadosh, and the Orach Chaim HaKadosh in his Sefer on Yeridei at length, he says that one cannot eat grasshoppers at all. Okay, many paiskim in the Moroccan paiskim and certain Sfardi paiskim and Teimani paiskim, they disagree with this Orach Chaim HaKadosh. So there's interesting Maramakim. There's a sefer called Kaf Naki from a Reb Kalfi B'Malka. Reb Kalfi B'Malka was born in 1670. He was a Chashav Yid, and he was a prolific writer, but all his materials remained in manuscript. But luckily for him, the Chidah, he was a Moroccan gadol, and the Chidah saw his material, and he quotes it a lot in his different. The Chidah who saw tons of manuscripts, he saw this Kaf Naki, and he quotes it a lot. Halacha l'maisa. Anyway, the Kaf Naki, it seems, has a arichos where he comes out, he deals with what the Orach Chaim HaKadosh says, and he comes out that it's mutter. And this piece is quoted, and we don't have this piece that where he says mutter. That sefer got lost, but the Chidah saw it, and others gedolim saw it. Okay, but more very recently, less than 10 years ago, the sefer Kaf Naki came out with different parts of his manuscripts, and a different postscript from a sefer Shikha Veleket. It turns out that he was chayzer from his heter that he gave to eat grasshoppers. And this is not so well known, especially the sefer is only very, very recent. And it came out, and he came out. What's significant is the Moroccan Gadol, and even though originally he's one of the people that's quoted that's arguing on the Archaim HaKadosh, here he is seemed to be chayzer. We don't have the whole reason why he's chayzer, nor do we have the reason why he's arguing the Archaim HaKadosh. Okay. Now the question is, and this is the question that everyone wants to know, is did Reb Chaim Kanievsky, what's the story about this grasshopper? Did it come to visit him? And what's the story behind? Now, so Reb Chaim Kanievsky, interestingly enough, I was very curious to see, does Reb Chaim Kanievsky himself make any mention of seeing a grasshopper? So, and what's very significant is, we'll see why it's very significant to see a grasshopper, but, so I looked through the whole sefer, and I see that Reb Chaim Kanievsky himself says as follows, on page 118, when he's talking about, and it plays out, this is a part where it's very negeh to know the Metzius, he says, V'chein he'idu li b'shem sifrei hateva, how a grass, shachagav yeshloi v'chulu v'chulu. So, understand, he saw the grasshopper. You go further in the sefer, page 123, and then he says, V'sha'lani l'bali hateva v'amru li v'chulu v'chulu v'chulu. So he asked. You go further in the sefer, not such a big sefer, only 30 pages, well worth learning through. And then he says, he brings something from the Sefer Abris, and then he says, V'chein he'iduli b'shem sifrei hateva. So, Reb Chaim Kanievsky, at least in the printed versions of the story, he talks about that he spoke to people, he spoke to experts, he asked different people. Now, again, back to the Mishpacha magazine, this is in the Pesach issue. So one of the daughters, there's an interview with the daughters, and it says here, she remembers the famous story about the grasshopper. Abba was learning the signs of the grasshoppers, which led to the sefer. He sent me to a neighbor who was a science teacher to ask if she had a book with pictures of a grasshopper. She said she doesn't. And then suddenly we noticed on the windowsill a grasshopper. Now, already before Chaim Kanievsky was nifter, there's a fellow, Avishai Olbaum. Avishai Olbaum is the librarian of the Tel Aviv Library, and he has a blog, an excellent blog about Seforim and different things he does. It ties into the Parsha. And he has a whole post discussing about the different versions of the story about Chaim Kanievsky and the grasshopper in the various books on the Rebbetzin and the various nuschais. And on the internet there's a video with the person, a whole person about it, and you could see Chaim Kanievsky say, yes, it is true. So we're not coming to say that it's not true. I'm just pointing out these lashonos in the sefer. Now, just to conclude with a few short points. Number one, did this ever happen before that someone else was learning Hilchos grasshoppers or the sugya and a grasshopper flew in? So again, thanks we have the internet. Someone found first. I got it from a few different places. Someone first sent it, and then again and again. And bottom line is like this: there's a sefer Stay Yitzchak, which is printed in 1851. And the mechaber of the sefer, so he wrote a bunch of sefarim on Shas, and in Chulin Daf Nun Tes. And if I wouldn't have seen it, I wouldn't believe it. He's learning the sugya of grasshoppers, and it's again not clear what the simanim are. And then he says like this: he's not sure. Imam is not sure, and then all of a sudden he describes the Rashi, and then he brought it the next morning to show his Rebbe to see. So we see a sefer in 1851 had the similar type of story, but this author went ahead and printed it. Okay, now. So you'll think the story ends there. So the Sefer Stay Yitzchak was reprinted by Mechona Havat Shalom into 2 volumes. It's available today. The actual Sefer is available on Hebrew Books. You can see this piece. Now, what's interesting is like this. So I decided to go the next step, and that is, who's the author of the Sefer? So it turns out there's a whole mythos how this author, he was a mamash. It sounds like he was a very shvacha person in IQ level also, and it's a whole mythos story how he became who he became. and he became a successful businessman and a successful Talmud Chacham. So this is not the only nace with the grasshoppers. It seems he had a lot of nisim, and this in the introduction from Ahavat Shalom, they have various makaris. So I was looking up more. I wanted to see something more about this sefer. So I check and I see in the Mifal bibliography it describes that there's a sefer written against the sefer. What's the sefer called? The sefer is called Vayistabel HaChagav. Okay? So I'm curious to know what this person, because it sounds like it has to do with this thing, what's going on. So I immediately try to get a copy of the book. I sent someone to get it. It's missing in Hebrew University. Once it's missing in Hebrew University, it's stuck. So Havat Shalom, they write, they saw it in a private collection, in a collection of Meir Ben Yo. So I write to the librarian of Meir Ben Yo. No, he doesn't have it. Maybe it's in the private library. Send it to the son. I was about to write to the son. It's already today coming, the thing I sent back. I said, you know what? Today I'm giving the shir. So let me try one last time to see maybe there's an extra copy, and they found an extra copy. I look again, there is extra copy. I send back my guy, Baruch Hashem, he was there today, and he finds the sefer. Taka, someone wrote a 7-page booklet, and the whole thing, now it doesn't say why he's doing this, but the whole sefer is attacking this piece. It's baloney, he can't believe it, and it's 7 pages, this rare book, there's no copy in the world except in Hebrew University has a copy from a copy that was in Tel Aviv library. Anyway, bottom line is, this no one has seen, it's not available on the internet, and this sefer is all about that this piece, that this mechaber, it's baloney. Okay. I promise you, if someone would write such a thing about Chaim Kanievsky today, I feel bad what would happen. But anyway, we have video recording of Chaim Kanievsky that the story did happen. All his daughters say it. They said it at the Levaya. And this is a story that's been well known already in his lifetime. Just it's very cute that he himself, when he's talking about it, he doesn't mention it. He just mentions they spoke to experts. When he looked at it, okay. Now, what's going on here? So Stam, this is the last prat to talk about today, relating to all this. He quotes the Sefer HaBris. So Bichlal, I hope to discuss more about the significance of the Sefer HaBris for Chaim Kanievsky. It was very significant for Chaim Kanievsky. But for this, for just now, just to talk on one aspect, and that relates to this whole thing of seeing this. Why was it so important to see the grasshopper? So, Mamish Bekitzer Nimrat, I mentioned already a few times. I'm fascinated by it. The Chida wrote travels of when he used to when he traveled all over, and one of the things he mentions a bunch of times is he went to visit zoos, he saw animals, he saw different animals, he made a March Mishana Abrius. And the question is why he was so interested always to seeing animals, and he recorded it. Okay, he made the bracha b'seder, but what was... So I thought about it a lot, and my conclusion was that it was not only... There was a lot more going on, and that was possibly relates to, in general, when one learns any particular sugya, specifically a sugya like grasshoppers. And and there's also there's two aspects. So the main aspect is that there's the Rashi brings down a Taurus Kehanim about, again, back to these psukim of being able to know what's the bimavdil being tam vitar, that you have that loy bevara shoyna el shetei yodeya umakir ubaki behem. You should know to be bucky in them. The Mizrahi says not only should you learn them, but you should be Toreach to be makir, which is tame, which is tar, and so to the carbon Aaron learns up over there this Taurus Kehanim. So the nakuda is that there's a halacha there. You're learning a sugya about grasshoppers, you learn the Shulchan Aruch, but you don't know how it looks. How could you even begin to even pass about it? So Chaim Kanievsky also knew about it. Okay, so what did he do? He went. According to the way he writes is he went experts, and then in the end he saw he was able to announce that a grasshopper came, and he was able to see with his own eyes. But there's a nakuda to see, and that's why the Chida was so concerned. One of the aspects behind why the Chida was concerned to go to the zoos, I saw Gedalia Nadal Mashal, he went specifically to see all different animals, taka for this reason, to be able to identify which animals are kosher and not, and he's really being Mekayim this nakuda. Reb David Tzvi in his Pirush on Chumash shows that if you have a proper understanding of animals, it helps understand Chumash. When one learns Parak Shira, it's very helpful if you understand the animals to understand different things, and more than that. In general, So Nakuda number one is that there's a concept called the word is realia. I never was able to find the exact word how it is in English exactly, but it basically means is to if you know the Metzius, it helps you understand things better. So Lamashal, Rabbi Kappa, when you learn these psukim and you look at his pictures, and then today there's much more, it helps you get a better handle and understanding what's going on. And as Reb Chaim Kanievsky says, that's part of the mitzvah to learn at Be'iyun. So even though Reb Chaim Kanievsky was not doing it because he wanted to eat the grasshoppers, this is a chelik of Torah, and as I'm showing you from this Torah's Kahanim, also Rashi brings down that had the Mizrahi and the Carbonara learn it up. This is a mitzvah to mamish be to know this, so when let's say one goes to a zoo, or one goes and catches a grasshopper, he has his kid go outside, catch me a grasshopper, and you look at it and you learn the sugya, you mekayim mamish an extra mitzvah in the sugya. So that was the kuda behind in general. When one learns these type of sugyas, one should be aware and one should try. And this is what Chaim Kanievsky did. That's what he says he did. He went and he consulted experts. Now, one such expert was always the sefer, which Amir Tashem will talk more about. Now, just to conclude with one last prat, which relates to both these Seforim and will serve as the introduction to the next Seforim also. I said it was influenced by the Chazon the Vilna Gaon, and the Mishnah Berurah. Now, so one of the most incredible books that I've ever read about a gadol is the book written by the Chafetz Chaim's son about his father, the Chafetz Chaim. Every time I go just to look up one page, I end up reading 20 pages. I just recently, over Chalmai, read it over again, and I highly, highly recommend it. It's mamish beautiful. And you get an unbelievable appreciation of the Chafetz Chaim, and some of the aspects actually will play out later on. But in part of the Nakuda that I see with Reb Chaim Kanievsky in both these two Seforim, where he uses where he mamish starts from scratch, from the psukim, as I said, and he comes all the way to halacha l'maisa, and he's bringing everything. So the Chafetz Chaim's son writes the following. What was my father's Seder Halimud? He says it's like this. We used to begin, he learned with the Chafetz Chaim a lot, he helped him with the Mishnah Berurah also, and he says we will begin with the psukim, we will move on to the Mechilta, if there's a Safra, a Sefrei, Targum, Rashi, Ramban. He says, I remember him learning Egla Arufa. This Egla Arufa line I forgot about, and a listener pointed out, similar to with Reb Chaim Kanievsky with Nachal Eson. And we learned the whole parasha with the Sefrei, Hagoy Sagra, Targum, Rashi, Ramban. Then they move on. They learn the Gemaras, then the Mishnayos, the Tosefta. Then we learn the Gemara, the Mishnah, then the Yerushalmi. Then we would move on to the Rambam. And this is how he would learn till he would go further down to the Rif and the Rambam and the Rishonim that he was able to get, till he would go through Rush. Then he would check the sunlight, Smag, Truma, Zarua, Ramban, Raj Ritva, Ram, Meiri, Eter. Then he would also don't forget the Shultas and the Bahag, the Goinim. And then he would go with the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch, and then the rest we'll get to a different time. But the point is, when one looks at this, and then you look very carefully at these two Seforim, these small Chiburim of Reb Chaim Kanievsky, before we even get to the other Seforim, you see this is what Reb Chaim Kanievsky did. He mamish sat down, he started from the beginning, you open up the psukim. There's a famous joke everyone loves to say, how does the yeshiva bacher know a pasuk? He never opens it up. They know there's all different versions of the joke. How does he know Moshe and Aaron are brothers? It's not because he knows the psukim, but it's because of his tzayis. Anyway, same type of thing. But here, Reb Chaim Kanievsky, he started from the beginning, he went through the Rishonim, and it's not only what I'm saying is this Chafetz Chaim's son is saying this is how my father taught me how to learn. This is how the Mishnah Berurah itself was written, and we'll have a lot more to say. But this is just an introduction to insight into the method of Reb Chaim Kanievsky to give us some glimpse of what's behind these Seforim.
Excellent. Wow, there is so much information there to unpack. Amazing, as always. Now I know next time one of my daughters asks me to get rid of a spider, I should hold it and examine it and learn it for posterity. Okay, thank you very much.
Make sure to show it to her. You have to make sure to show it to her.
Absolutely, I could tell her this is how Reb Chaim and previous Gedolim, the Chidah, they used to look for these animals all the time. The Chaim and Mitzvah, always.
You should show her the Rashi. You sit down with Rashi. Now we're going to go. That's it. Exactly. Okay, great speaking with you. Let's do it again soon. Have a good day. You too. Bye.